Dr. Bill Adams here. This is No Spin Live, and do we have a show for you today? We're going to talk about a doctor calls for the ban of Botox for those under 25 years old, and a negative Google review costs a patient $500,000. And we've got a great group of international experts to share their insights today. We've got Dr. Peter Fedor from Beverly Hills and Aspen. We have Dr. Bill Cortesis from Charlotte, North Carolina. How's it going there in Charlotte, Bill?
Awesome. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. And then last but not least, Dr. Jason Posner from Boca Raton. What's up, JP?
Hot Florida. Here's where you are in the summer.
Let's get into this. We have, this is actually a story out of Ireland. Doctor is a plastic surgeon. He's actually calling for a ban of Botox for those that are under 25 years old. Peter, lead us off on this one. What are your thoughts on this kind of strange decree?
Well, I got a lot of thoughts about, but firstly, perhaps it's okay to do some to use some moderation on whom we give Botox and injectables. The thing has gotten quite a bit out of hand. Now, that doesn't mean that I fully agree with all the comments that this gentleman made, including the fact that you have to wait for the face to fully grow until the age of 25. We know from studies, and I did a study on rhinoplasties in this respect many years ago, that faces, some aspects of the face may take into the very early 20s, such as the jaw, to obtain full growth. But I don't think that other parts of the face share that same kind of situation as far as growth goes. I also don't think that using a needle around the face will necessarily negatively affect the growth centers, but I'd be curious to know the other two guys on this panel, and of course you, Bill, what you think about that. But to use a moderation and to hold back a little bit when somebody 15 years old comes back for Botox, comes into practice for Botox or injectables, I don't think that's a bad idea, and I think something we should keep in mind. Maybe later, while we're discussing this segment, we should also discuss about regulatory issues in regards to neurotoxins, which Botox is one of the neurotoxins, the other ones, and fillers, because that is different in Ireland, and this article spoke about that also from the United States, but maybe we can address that also.
Yeah, I mean, Bill, this article, there's a lot of points to talk about, but it kind of gives an impression that all of us are just wildly injecting Botox and fillers in a bunch of 20-year-olds, which is obviously not true, but what are your thoughts?
I think to set an age limit is at 25 is completely arbitrary, right? Like, how do you come up with the number of when to treat somebody? And so we have to be doctors and treat the patient for what they absolutely need. And, if we practice ethical medicine and moral standards and we do what's right for the patient, I don't think there's an actual age limit that we need to use. We just need to use discretion as to when we treat certain patients with certain types of drugs or products, and be good ethical plastic surgeons like we are. I think to have an arbitrary age limit doesn't really make a whole lot of sense to me.
Jason, you guys injecting a bunch of 19-year-olds with fillers?
It's funny because I think the media tends to sensationalize things, and I just agree with what Peter said. I mean, the issue is like, I can't remember the last toxin filler patient who was under 30. I mean, it's pretty rare for them to come in the office anyway. And normally when people come in when they're under 30, it's either for lip injections or they need some neuromodulator because they really need some neuromodulator. When you're seeing someone in their 20s, their lines are super hyperactive, and you look at them and like, you really need this emergently. So the people who usually come in are the ones who really need it, and we're not really doing people in there. I might see someone under 20 once in a blue moon, but for the most part, I mean, people who need their fillers really need their fillers and are very reasonable who are coming in. The media sensationalizes all this stuff, and I agree with Peter in that I've never seen any articles that saying that a face is not formed till 25. I think that's ridiculous. I've never seen anything saying that if you stick needles in the face, you're going to interfere with growth centers. That's a bunch of crap. So I think this guy was just talking out of his butt, and I think that it's not realistic at all. And we're all ethical, trying to be ethical doctors and just do our best.
But meantime, for the sake of our viewers, maybe we should mention the fact that neurotoxins, again, Botox, Zeomax, number of 3-4 of them by now, Dysport, they can be used also for what, let's call it, reconstructive purposes, because that's how Botox was initially developed. It was developed because they were treating cross-eyedness, nystagmus, and then torticollosis when the neck was paralyzed to one direction. And not until eventually somebody, Jules Stein, one of the ophthalmologists, started using it for the area in between the eyebrows, we call medically the glabella, that it started getting some aesthetic uses. So I think in those instances, it's totally justifiable to use it at a younger age.
Yeah, well, I think those are great points. And the other thing that, just again, the way some of these things are written, it kind of gives people the impression, oh my God, like this stuff is like permanent poisons and things like that. And the truth is, all the main stuff that we typically use, which is neurotoxins like Botox or hyaluronic acid fillers, they're just temporary and they're completely reversible, and there's no long-term side effects. So I think there's some misleading kind of parts of this article that's misleading the reader a little bit. But well, let's move on to that second topic. This is quite interesting. I don't know if this is the first one, but it's actually seems like maybe the most one of the more visible ones that I've seen. But reviews and things have gotten to be big, not only when you order on Amazon, but in plastic surgery too. So people getting reviewed. Sometimes, I think we've talked about this once before, and I think there's a lot to talk about there. But this particular story is from Australia, and a patient had a negative review that negatively affected the physician's, the plastic surgeon's practice, and they actually lost a $500,000 settlement in court. Jason, what are your thoughts on this?
I think we all have a love-hate relationship with reviews. That we like reviews when they are to our benefit. Like if you're going on Amazon trying to decide between two different things, it's nice to read what other people thought of this piece of crap versus great. But on the other hand, with reviews, we usually find that most people who are satisfied don't have the time or energy to put positive reviews. And you're going to get the negative review that I had to wait an hour for Dr. Adams because he was stuck in the operating room, and they give you a 1-star review, not because of your surgical skills, but you got stuck in the operating room and you were late. So I think you really have to read these things carefully. But it's nice to see that there is a little recourse from our side of things when someone posts a blatantly false review, that they accused this doctor of not performing a surgery that he said he did, and the case turned out that he did the procedure and the patient got sued and the patient had to pay. So it's nice to see that there's some recourse for someone just being nasty and posting things that are completely false.
Peter, over your time in practice, reviews and kind of evaluation of the physicians changed a lot, right? So what do you think about this?
It changed tremendously, and I have this overall feeling, and it's a good and bad thing. You have to, just like Jason said, and I agree with everything he said, but it didn't exist, and social media didn't exist, and then now it's kind of a double-edged sword. And there are some people who are very smartly using social media to their benefit, but also there are many stories where practices got negatively affected by not necessarily justified, for that one, unjustified negative reviews. It hasn't happened to me yet, and I think that's just a matter of luck. I think it's going to happen sooner or later. But I think it's refreshing, just like Jason said, that all of a sudden, there is a decision in favor of the provider. But I also think that this whole social media situation has come to its zenith. It comes to its summit, and it's going to have to start softening and going in a different direction, because it's just too many times people who don't necessarily deserve the glory that is attributed to them, meaning providers. And I'm not just talking about plastic surgeon, I'm talking about legitimate, non-legitimate providers in aesthetic medicine and surgery. They get credit because of the social media, for which they haven't deserved by their accomplishment, by their discoveries in the field, and by the way they practice. And that's very sad. So the social media is also being manipulated by the providers and not just by patients.
Yeah, Bill, you're an expert in this area. So what the people that are watching this No Spin, what would you tell them about doctor reviews and the big picture?
Well, I think it holds doctors to a certain standard. And I think it's good that patients have the ability to be able to write reviews about us. But I agree, there is a negative aspect of it. There's the potential where patients can write some really bad things about us. But I think it also validates the good reviews as well. If you have a few negative reviews, I think the downside with the system we have right now is the fact that there's no validation process in regards to whether or not we actually saw the patient or we actually did the procedure. And that's the weak link in this whole process. And I know some review sites have really tried to kind of create a validation process where the doctor approves whether or not they actually saw the patient, but that doesn't give you anonymity in being able to write the review. So overall, I think it's a good thing to be able to have a review system because, again, it holds doctors accountable for great care, great service. It gives patients freedom of speech to be able to write what they want to write. But the downside is people can say and do whatever they want to do without true validation that they actually got the procedure that they were wanting. So it's difficult. From a social media perspective, I use it routinely, and it is becoming a greater avenue for me personally and our practice to get more patients in the door. And I think we have to embrace it. It is the wave of the future and what our young population is using to analyze doctors. And so we really have to embrace the technology and what's happening and be a part of it.
I'm going to disagree because I would rather have the double secret office where you need the double secret password and the double secret knock to get in the door. That would be my ultimate goal. I don't know about you guys, but it gets tiresome a little bit. I mean, I don't know how many of you guys have left a review for a restaurant because you had such a great time and the food was so good. I've never done that in my life, but everyone's very quick to say, oh, there was a roach in my food, the place is terrible, but no one says what a great time they had at any place. So I think it's skewed towards the negativity. That's what always.
Yeah, but I think people, I'm going to disagree with you. I think reviews for restaurants are completely different than reviews for doctors, and we know now word of mouth is probably how we get a majority of our patients, right? And so
no question.
Social media is a different word of mouth forum.
But Bill, I agree with what you're saying. On the other hand, this is the byproduct of social media, that this is how patients come to you. Doesn't necessarily mean, and I'm not talking about you personally, but I'm saying in generic you, doesn't mean that you're a better doctor because you know how to manipulate the social media better. And that's the implication more times than not. And I may be archaic in my viewpoint, but I know from a lot of my younger colleagues who I'm very friendly with that they work more and they admit on their own. I say, I hate to do this, but I have to do it. This is the usual comment.
Yeah, Bill, one point you made quickly, but I think it was really important was, the people that have reviews that are just totally homogeneous, like every single review is a glowing review, or obviously I think that's a red flag because nobody's going to have that. You probably should have, majority of your reviews should be positive, but there's probably going to be a few in there that are negative, and that doesn't necessarily mean it's a bad doctor. It just means that sometimes the outcome may have been not what the patient wanted, but there are a million different factors in that. And also, if the doctor has a terrible review, every review is terrible, then that also probably, is something to be noted. But at the end of the day, it's kind of the accountability, Jason. That's what we talked about before, because there's some, the late great Jack Gunner was a great example of social media that was a slanderous thing that went on for years, he having to deal with, and that's not right either. So just because there's some social media platform, it doesn't mean you should be able to take a great surgeon that spent their career, developing their craft, and they get one person takes them through the mud, some bogus deal. That's completely ridiculous.
We used to go to the meetings and we used to hear people talk about, oh, I have no complications. And we used to sit in the audience and say, there's only two types of surgeons who have no complications.
Yeah, I remember.
Those who don't do surgery and those who lie.
Right.
right? And it's the same thing about social media, because I find that, the 1 or 2 patients that you might have a problem with might be the ones that are posting, but the 1,000 patients I did that year had no problems that are not posting. So I think the problem is our fault a little bit for not getting our happier patients to post. But I think it gets a little frustrating at times when you do see a patient that might have posted a negative review because someone posted because they lost their ring in our office and we got a 1 star. Well, I had nothing to do with that. Or we had to wait an hour because we were stuck.
I don't have any problem asking patients to write nice reviews about us. And honestly, I do it in a joking manner in the office, and I think it works well. And the thought about being afraid about social media needs to go out the door. Like you said, Peter, it's here to stay. The train's left the station, so we have to embrace it and do it the best we can. And if we can do it ethically, if the society itself can put some guidelines, out there for members, that you have to abide by these ethical standards, just like we did for advertising, right? They have ethical standards for all the advertising we do. I think the same should apply for social media, and use it appropriately.
Yeah, and I think the patients, just need to know, just like this story shows, you can be accountable for what you do too. So the door swings both ways. Well, I think that won't be the last time we talk about it. Those are some great insights, and you can see more of this on the plasticsurgerychannel.com.